This conference will now be recorded.
All right. Good evening. I would like to call to order this regular town council meeting for Tuesday, June 9th, 2020. Please rise for a moment of silence. We'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Thank you. Fishbein,
Here.
Laffin,
Here.
Marone, yes, I see you.
Here.
Okay,
Here.
thank you. Morgenstein,
Here.
Shortell,
Here.
Tata,
Here.
Testa,
Here.
Sandri,
Here.
Chairman Savoni,
Here.
Mayor, one more, I got a few more people, sorry. Mayor Dickinson,
Here.
Jim Bowes,
Present.
and Attorney Farrell.
Present.
Present? Okay, thank you very much. I'm all set.
All right, and just for the record, Attorney Bill Fozzie is on the call as well.
I know, thank you.
I'm not sure there are new attendees, but just in case, I'm going to go through the announcement quickly about how the meeting's going to run. Members of the public, please keep your microphones muted during the meeting unless you are the person asking a question. Also, kindly keep your camera inactive unless you are speaking. We can only one person speak at a time. If we speak over each other, the system chooses and it makes for a lousy recording. So if you are questioning a presenter, please allow them to finish speaking before you acknowledge what they've said or ask them another question. I don't need a gavel. I have a mute all button. So if people aren't participating respectfully, I will use that. We will continue through the agenda. If you have questions regarding a particular agenda item, I suggest you use the chat bar. It's in the upper right corner. Click on the little chat icon. It's a cartoon text bubble, and type into me that you would like to speak. If you do speak as a member of the public, please identify yourself, name and address. And the order I'll go through from the public is those on digital I'll go to first, and then I will go to those on the telephone. All right, with that, can we have a motion on the consent agenda?
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve or accept consent agenda items A through U.
Thank you.
Fucking thing.
Moved and seconded. All right, on to item 4. There are no items removed from the consent agenda. And
Excuse me, Chairman, can we get a vote on that, please?
oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll on the consent agenda vote?
All right, for a change. Fishbein,
Yes.
Laffin,
Yes.
Marone, I can't hear you.
He mouthed yes.
He gave me a thumbs up, yes. Morgenstein,
Yes.
thank you. Shortell,
Yes.
Tata,
Yes.
Testa,
Yes.
Zandri,
Yes.
Chairman Savoni.
Yes.
Consent agenda passes.
Yes.
All yeses, thank you. There's Joe's the yes, thank you.
Yeah, Joe's on a
Yes.
30-second delay. All right, sorry about that. On to item 4. There are no items removed from consent. On to item 5.
Zandri,
Okay. Mr. Civitelli, are you with us?
I am, Mr. Chairman. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm hoping that progress has been made and that would make your report a little more shorter and a little more pleasant.
I would agree with that. So I will try and keep it short. As of right now, good evening, everyone. As of right now for June, I'll start with the statistical analysis that we've been running more and more lately now that we have more data. June, we've had only 6 cases in the town, and we're 9 days in, which is definitely a positive at this point. 1 from our long-term care facilities and 5 from our community cases. So if you're looking at our overall numbers, we have 461 confirmed cases from the time this started in early March. But again, at this point, we're looking at still 90%, 97% of our fatalities are still in our long-term care facilities and 3% are in the community. We are, as of right now, so that would, when looking at some of our other statistical analysis, we found that the mortality rate in our long-term care facilities over the course of this event was 27%. And the mortality rate for our community cases was at 0.86%. So you could obviously see the disparity there in what we're seeing and how this was impacted of the congregate living facilities. But aside from the statistical analysis, there's a lot of other things going on at this point that I'll try and keep it brief. I just got off a call with the Board of Education. I was invited to go to talk about graduation. There was a vote made by the board to have the graduation for both high schools in the first 2 weeks of July. And a new survey is going to be issued this Friday to the students, is my understanding, to try and see what that would look like. In terms of other things that our office is doing, our office has been under a tremendous amount of work at the last few days with the reopening guidelines being sent out on Sunday. And just so everybody kind of gets a quick understanding of how this impacts us. So we have the executive orders that we have to have a broad understanding of, the sector guidance that seems to come out every few weeks, and then our normal public health statutes. So when these come out, we have to have a pretty firm understanding of what the expectations are for our local businesses, and try and relay that message to them as to how to operate. So again, with the indoor dining for food service facilities coming back online, 50% capacity, June 17th, we've been working with our operators trying to get that in line, as well as having all personal services, including nail and tattoo facilities, will be able to operate again come June 17th. We've been spending a considerable amount of time learning the new contact tracing system that was offered by the state of Connecticut. Right now, we're monitoring 21 cases in town. However, the majority of those cases are going to come off of our monitoring system by the end of the week. So in terms of total caseload and what we're monitoring in terms of contact tracing, I think we're in a much better shape than we were, say, 6 to 8 weeks ago. And diving into the actual, we've talked in the past about the reproduction value, about how when you have one person contract the illness, how many people therefore thereafter get it. Early on in the event, for every one person that contracted COVID-19, you'd see 2 to 3 people obtain it. Now we're down below 1%, or for every one person that gets it, roughly 0.74 people get it. And what that really means is if you have one of these values below 1, the total number of cases is reducing in the general population, which was the ultimate goal. That's essentially what we were supposed to be doing by social distancing, flattening the curve, was to not enable the virus in and of itself to reproduce in the community. So we did achieve that and some. And compared to some of our neighboring states, Connecticut is doing fairly well with some of the measures that we have taken. When we're looking, one of the other questions that we seem to get frequently is about Quinnipiac Valley Center. We have the recovery unit, which is in operation for the last few weeks. I did talk to them this morning, and that particular unit has 13 patients on site right now for the COVID recovery unit. 8 were from the acute step down from hospitals to relieve the hospital system, and 5 were from internal residents. So again, a lot of the numbers are trending in the right direction, as Councilor Savoni was hoping. The trend is in the right direction. Our sanitarians have been working quite a bit on their normal duties, but again, trying to get our businesses up and running as quickly as possible. And we've also been spending a considerable amount of time with the Board of Education as of late, trying to see what summer school would look like for us. We are going to be moving forward with summer school after July 6th, is my understanding. So we want to make sure that that's done in a safe manner for the employees and the students. So that's kind of where we are right now. Again, I didn't want to hold everybody too long, but I feel free to ask any questions.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the council? I see none. And questions or comments from the public? I see none. And let me just does anybody from the public on the telephone have questions about the COVID report? All right. Thank you, Mr. Civitelli. Have a good evening.
You too. Thank you.
Yep. On to item 6. Councilor Tata, Councilor Morgenstein, this is your item.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Servo. So I had asked to resume and I was appointed in our meeting that I asked to put on, and that was not done. And so I wanted to have a discussion amongst the counselors. I think we all believe there is a value to public question and answer, and we have certain rules that we follow. There are some guidelines. An example I'll give of the need for a public question and answer is that just this, I have gotten, as I believe others of you have, several letters just in the past few days from members of the public, because our agenda gets formed and has to be in, and we can't add things at the last minute. There are questions out there from the public that are going unanswered, other than if some of us individually in these letters put our thoughts down in answering these letters. But beyond that, people's what they're looking to heard by the public is not getting heard. I also letters that there are limitations to public question and answer. It's not a back and forth. It went away when we remote. I think we've gotten in many venues of our lives quite good at doing remote. Our very first remote meeting, we had a significant problem that people probably remember. But since then, our chairman is running a very good meeting, a very tidy, there's no interference. And I see no reason why the public should be silent. I'd like to hear fellow counselors and hopefully get them to vote. I guess I can make a motion. I'd like to make a motion that we resume public question and answer.
I'll second.
Thank you. And that's all I have for right now, Mr. Chairman.
Sure. So we have been conducting these virtual meetings to deal with restrictions and limitations on public gatherings and the safety thereof. And this has all happened during a time when one of the governor's executive orders encouraged us to go ahead and do business as we needed to without comment from the public. So I think we've gone to great lengths to include topic-specific public comment. And I don't believe that these meetings, and oh, by the way, Councilor Morgenstein, thank you for the kind words about the way I've been running the meetings. But I do not believe that this meeting format lends itself to an open public question and answer period, particularly when, as you indicated, people are able to email us and get our thoughts directly. And, you know, there's a lot more ability to have direct contact with government than there was 60 years ago when our present form of government was formed. With that, I have a question from Councilor Zandri.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my question sort of plays into the topic at hand, which is getting the ability to bring the public back into a forum where we're better suited for a Q&A. When, based on the guidelines that we've already got coming down from Hartford, when will we be back to holding these meetings in town council chambers?
My best guess is sometime in July or August, based upon the information that I've recently been given.
All right, so that's another meeting in June will probably be virtualized like this. And then we may, based on the date in July, because we usually have one meeting in July and one meeting in August, we may be back by the following meeting. So we may only be dealing with this another meeting.
Yes.
Okay, I wanted to get an understanding of that because, you know, in Councilor Morgenstein's item and motion has merit, but we do want to get that input from the public. We've been getting an awful lot of input from the public lately in the form of email, most of which isn't getting read into the meeting as official commentary, but also too, we're not receiving it that way either. We're not getting the emails saying, you know, I would like this to be presented at the meeting and read into the minutes of the meeting and so forth. So I also think there's some process there. I think some people don't understand that would only happen if asked, you know, and so on. So I think, you know, we're getting to the end of the rope. I would think that, you know, if we go beyond July or if something turns a bad corner, we have to sit at this style a little bit longer. Maybe we try to meet it in the middle somewhere, but I wanted to get a good understanding of what the time threshold looks like. And it looks like we're only a meeting or so out from going back to normal. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Marone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
All right. So I'll be real brief. Actually, Mr. Zandri pretty much stole all of my thunder. To me, it's all about how long it'll take to get us back to normal. I agree that public comment is a vital part of these meetings. So, you know, I think our governor in many ways has acted like a dictator with regard to this crisis. And so I think his executive order was sort of in the spirit of his dictatorial leadership of our state. So I'd like us to get back to public comment as soon as possible. I mean, if it's you know, August is when we think we're going to have our next in-person meeting, I guess I'm okay with that. But I think we could work out a system, you know, where perhaps more rigidly, you know, we allow people to present even questions in the comments section or something, just to keep the public involved a bit. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I see a request from Mayor Dickinson.
Yes, members of council, my understanding is the council meetings could be held in the town hall now. It's a question of, you know, whether you want to come to town hall. The governor's order exempted local government. So you get other questions when you have legislative bodies that don't they do things in a public hearing. A public hearing could raise a question, or in some towns, when they adopt a budget, it is a town meeting, and now the number of people coming it's not government doing it, it's actually votes by the general public. So that raises other questions. But operational meetings of local government have never been part of the governor's orders, to my knowledge.
Counselor Laffin?
Thank you. Yeah, so I think we've all just been trying to get by in the last several weeks and trying to just accomplish the bare necessities to getting things done. I know that like I'm sitting in front of a 27-inch screen with every single view ever since that first meeting, so that we can watch everybody that's in and out and all these things and knock them off or mute them whenever possible. As Gina referenced in the first meeting, was pretty challenging or unexpected. I think everybody's doing the best they can, and to Gina's point, but I think maybe on the flip side of it, she said a lot of like kind of hot topics or items have come up in the last couple of weeks or the week alone, and I think we've done our best to manage those on our own. But at the same time, we also do our best to post the appropriate agenda items so that everybody can have notice and come speak when it's necessary and when important, versus the public and question and answer period in the last several years. Honestly, it's just ended up a place for the same people to ask similar questions that they've asked before, kind of on camera. And I'm not against that or giving them that avenue. I just think right now things are a little tight. And at any time, anybody, including those individuals, can email all of us or contact all of us and get an agenda item added or be present or available for one of the agenda items we do have. I think if we've got one meeting to go or so, let's get through this meeting and see how it's going to kind of flush out. I don't know, I guess in the chambers are we limited by the amount of people in the chambers, or if we keep people 6 feet apart, because it's large. I mean, if only 9 people are showing up, or 12 counting us, does it, I don't know what changes after that. Again, I'm not against it. Operationally, I think it's been working out fine. I'm not aware of any overt or blatant issues where people have been upset that they've not been heard or had their questions answered. So if it's not really broken at this time, I think everybody's understanding, and we should just kind of get this over with and move on back to normal. Thanks.
Counselor Testa?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we could start up the public question and answer period again with, in a reasonable way. Interestingly, there's a lot of discretion in the hands of the chair in the first place on how the meetings are handled. And I thought about how we might be, have control over who's speaking, but it'd really be no different than at a regular council meeting. In fact, probably have more control. I don't. It's easy for me to recommend more responsibility for the chairman to make his job harder. But you remember when we had really contentious, you're welcome, when we've had rather contentious issues with a lot of people wanting to speak, we've asked people to sign in and who wants to speak and have a list of them available so things did not get out of hand. Well, without question, I think there's, there can be an opportunity for anybody who would like to ask a question to do so, request it in the chat bar, get put in a line. You might even be able to put a little bit more stricter limit on the time frame of each person, but to give them the opportunity, the few that might be here on these meetings, to do what they've always done, ask a question. I think it can be managed. I certainly don't think anything terrible happened up to now. I mean, it's not like we've been restrictive in a way that's been unfair, but I think the sooner we can open things up to a true public meeting, the better. And I think we could do it in a reasonable, controlled manner. And frankly, like you say, Mr. Chairman, you've got the mute button. And if someone decides to get carried away, you can just turn them off. But that's just my view. I think it's a good idea. We should go ahead. As far as the mention of possibly going back to town hall in a couple of weeks, I'd like to revisit that one because I'm not comfortable with that yet myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Testa. Up next is Councilor Shortell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I lost contact of this whole thing, so if this is, sorry, I'll try to get this in before I lose my connection again. But first of all, I think you've done a great job with these meetings, running them. We had the first one, we used the conference call, we went totally virtual. And I also want to, again, if this was said before, I apologize, but with the budget, we did have public comment on the budget workshops. You maintained that. You didn't have to because the governor, I believe, exempted us from that. We didn't have to have public comment at the workshops because of the situation. So I think people did get a chance to ask questions literally in every aspect of our budget over the last 6 weeks. So that's a good thing. And I am dying to go back. I mean, there is nothing I would like more than to be sitting up there and listening to Bob Gross talk about the pension. Trust me, I am dying to get out of this house and do something, but I also don't want to. I'm with Councilor Testa and Councilman Morgan's team. I'm a little concerned about rushing back to town hall. I don't know how we maintain 6 feet, at least in that where we sit now. So I'd be, we're open to whatever, room 315, or if there's a way to reconfigure the Parisi chambers, I just think we have to look at that. And again, absent that, I do agree with Councilor Testa as well that we should look at if there's a way to do it. If we're not going back, we'll see what happens this summer. If there's a way to do it, not to make your job too hard, but since we moved on from the budget, I'd be open to obviously adding it back in. But that's all I had. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is some reservation about being in council chambers anytime soon. And the question becomes, are we able to conduct some version of a hybrid meeting? And I'm going to have to talk to Mr. Handley about that to see whether or not there can be some hybrid e-participation in the live meeting. Certainly under the circumstances is worthy of consideration. So I have another request from Councilor Laffin.
Thanks. Yeah, no, so I've seen some of the chat, and if some of the other councilors are concerned about returning to town hall, I think that's something then to kind of hash out or figure out, especially going forward more long term. And I don't want to be in a position where some of us rush back or show up in town hall and the others aren't, because I feel like that would feel all discombobulated and kind of put some people at an unfair footing. So I'm in total support. I understand people's uncertainty or anxiety about returning too quickly. So on the whole returning to town hall side, that's where I am. And I know that's not really what specifically we're talking about, but it ties into what I was kind of talking about, getting through one more meeting. So whether we come up with a longer game plan for the rest of the summer to get us through the fall and see if there's a second going around of the virus or not, that's fine. But I do support the apprehension of the other councilors about returning to town hall, if that's how they feel.
Thank you. Now on to comments from the public. The first request I had was from Mr. Chardulo, and I just need to figure out which caller you are.
I'm on the telephone. Can you hear me?
You are caller 7.
Good. Still can't figure out why my computer doesn't work, which is why I'm on the phone. But
well, when you were logged on earlier, I could hear what was going on in your room there. So the microphone is working.
Yep. My problem is I can't hear when you folks talk. It's on my end, and I haven't been able to figure out how to fix that. So here I am on the telephone again. At least I can see you. But yeah, regarding this question and answer period, I guess the question I have is what prompted this before I give you my response. I'm semi-shocked that it's even suggested, but what prompted you to make this decision to sort of want to do this now? I'm curious. Was it some problem that you had?
By this, what do you mean?
Deleting the question and answer period from this meeting and possibly subsequent meetings.
Yeah, this
Isn't that what we're talking about?
Yes, this whole virtual situation has been an evolving experiment. And the vice chairman and I are managing the electronic participation of people. We're constantly chasing mute buttons for people that dial in and don't have their phones muted as soon as they've dialed in, and other people who unmute their devices, and we're suddenly listening to what's going on in the family room.
Right.
There's a level of complexity to running these meetings that doesn't exist in town hall.
No.
And there seems to be a difference in the way people participate on screen from the way they participate in person. And that's certainly been my observation. You know, Councilor Testa alluded earlier to my ability to use the mute button instead of the gavel. And I think I've used it twice, maybe 3 times in the 3 months we've been doing things this way. And it was with great resentment from the person that I did it to. And it's just not an enjoyable experience. You know, we're running meetings this way out of concern for people's health and out of some level of necessity.
Right.
So from my perspective, when you consider that, I think the meetings should really be focused on the business that needs to be taken care of.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, no, I certainly haven't been involved in all of these virtual meetings, but I have come to the ones that I felt were important, and it seemed to work reasonably well. Of course, I'm not in your position of controlling all the levers, and I can appreciate what you're saying about the mechanics of it. But on the other hand, I think that public input is absolutely critical. And I think that the only forum that, from my perspective, that exists is the council meeting forum where someone in the public can come forward and bring an issue to the entire council, to the public, to the media. And that has a lot of value. And so I think this is, it's a very big deal. And so I support retaining that. I think that another point is that, again, notwithstanding the fact that we're going through a learning curve on the virtual situation, in general, when you look at the amount of time that the public takes during a Q&A in relation to the time taken in for the whole meeting, it's a fairly small number. So personally, I see it as almost as a freedom of information issue, and it's kind of a violation of the concept of having an open government and ensuring that the public has a pathway to that government. So it's a pretty big deal. I also feel that if you cut off public input, that adds to whatever perception that may exist with regard to transparency. And I happen to feel that Wallingford has been a non-transparent government. That's my personal view, and I've expressed that a number of times. Probably the most recent example, and I don't want to take us off on a tangent, but it came up through the council, and that was the building for the cemetery, Center Street Cemetery. That situation languished for 2 or 3 years, And had it not been for a citizen, Bill Comerford, coming forward and persisting and saying, hey, this is a real problem, that it got the attention. In this case, it got the attention of the mayor. And I noticed driving by it recently that apparently it's been repaired. So at another meeting, I'd like to pursue that a little bit to get into a little more depth. So basically, I think it's a pretty big deal, and I support, notwithstanding the difficulty of managing it from your perspective. I think it's worth the effort. Thank you.
Thank you. There was a request for comment from Tina Crispins, and her audio seems to be disabled. So I'm going to read what she said. She said the only email that is available for the majority of the town council is the overall email, not individual emails. And I do have a response, it seems, from Kevin or Cindy Sigovich. And I'm just going to ask if one of them wants to comment. If not, I'll read their comment.
Councilor Simone.
Yeah, go ahead. Yes.
No, just reinforcing that we've appreciated these conversations online, and the ability for callers or people to zoom into the meeting and just provide some feedback. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And then it appears that Mr. Beecher wants to comment. And forgive me, Mr. Beecher, I do remember an email discussion. I don't remember the specific topic, but the topic of discussion right now is whether or not to resume public question and answer on our agenda.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I know that recent weeks have gotten me much more interested, and I think if there is a serious dialogue about eliminating this, I think it's actually opened up the town. It's made it easier for public comment. I think I commented a couple of weeks ago about how impressed I was with how the council had struggled through getting to this new technology. We're all doing Zoom meetings these days. It's not easy. We're still learning, but I would be very disappointed if the Q&A were eliminated, especially at a time where, in my opinion, people are much more aware of how they're governed and what they want their government to do for them and with them, and not for them and with them. So if the topic is this, it would simply be, I would be in favor of keeping the Q&A if you can. And you've been very judicious with your muting button. I think that's the ultimate gavel. So I think people will let you know if they're distressed. As far as the email went, I don't know where it's proper to bring it up, but I sent an email to every counselor and to the town clerk, and I received no responses from anyone. So I don't know if there'll be a moment for me to raise the issues I raised in the email. I don't want to derail the Q&A for that.
Forgive me, Mr. Beecher, I thought I had responded to your email, but I'm happy to look for it later. And just to be clear, Mr. Beecher, we're not talking about eliminating the public Q&A forever. It's something that we're certainly going to add back to the meetings once we go back to council chambers. It's never been the intention to permanently eliminate it, just so we're clear.
I'm clear about that, but eliminating it during this, we don't know when this period is going to end right now, as far as I know. And how would the public get their comments to you in the absence of the Q&A?
There's emails, there's telephones, there's plenty of ways to get information to the council.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any new public comment, and I don't see any requests for comment from the council. So, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Can I speak one more second?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
Sorry, yeah, I should have put it in the chat box, sorry. So yeah, I think just circling around with Mr. Beecher and my original comments to the fact that, yes, people can send emails. The timing of someone sending an email and us then having our meeting often makes it so that an item cannot be put on our agenda until the next meeting. And I apologize, Mr. Beecher, that I did not get back to you. I had a 12-hour shift yesterday. And yes, we have no ability to discuss his email in this forum due to all of our rules. So I would take the opposite tact of some of my fellow counselors in that, oh, we only have one or two, possibly more meetings. All the more reason, and again, I appreciate the good job that you and Mr. Laffin are doing, but all the more reason in my mind that we should go ahead and put it back. It's not so many more meetings, but any issues that are being brought to our attention that wind up not able to be brought up by the public in the public meeting forum are issues that are not put out there, that the public is requesting be put out there. So I would encourage us to resume public Q&A in this forum rather than waiting until we're back in chambers. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. I see no further calls for public comment. And Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Thank you. Fishbein,
No.
Laffin,
No.
Marone,
Yes.
Morgenstein,
Yes.
Shortell,
I have no idea what we're voting on. I'm sorry.
I'll read you the motion to resume, it's okay, to resume public question and answer period to the agenda.
Yes.
Tata,
Yes.
Testa,
Yes.
Sandri,
Yes.
Chairman Savoni.
No.
The motion passes.
Motion carries. The next meeting will feature the public question and answer period.
Thank you.
All right, on to item 7, which is a public hearing to consider the following bonding ordinance. An ordinance appropriating $1,841,747 for the planning, acquisition, and construction of various municipal capital improvements 2020, 2021, and authorizing the issue of $1,841,747 bonds of the town to meet said appropriation, and pending the issuance thereof, the making of temporary borrowings for such purpose. I hereby convene the public hearing for the $1,841,747 appropriation and bond authorization for the 2020-21 capital improvement program. The ordinance, which is the subject of this public hearing, is available to the public and may be obtained at this meeting from the town clerk. Typically, they would be at the desk in council chambers. If you go to the town council website, you can look at a PDF. Is there a motion and a second to read the title of the proposed ordinance and to waive the reading of the remainder of the ordinance, incorporating its full text into the minutes of the meeting?
Mr. Chairman, I so move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Looks like it was seconded by Shortell. Madam Clerk, could you call the roll on that motion?
Fishbein,
Yes.
Laffin,
Yes.
Marone,
Yes.
Morgenstein,
Yes.
Shortell,
Yes.
Tata,
Yes.
Testa,
Yes.
Zandri,
Yes.
and Chairman Savoni.
Yes, motion passes. An ordinance, the title is an ordinance appropriating $1,841,747 for planning, acquisition, and construction of various municipal capital improvements 2020 and 2021, and authorizing the issue of $1,841,747 bonds of the town to meet said appropriation, and pending the issuance thereof, the making of temporary borrowings for such purpose. Are there any comments from the public? First request I see, or comment from the public, is Mr. Chardulo. I think we identified you as caller 7.
Yes.
There you are.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Yeah, I just want to say that I oppose this. This is a standard procedure, as you know. Every year the town puts this money, this bonding in prior to voting on the budget. And again, my objection is the same objection that I've made for a number of years, which is that the money, as I understand it, will be used. It's a double dipping, because the cap non-recurring fund, which you folks created, we're transferring funds every year out of the general fund, out of the surplus, into the cap non-recurring, so that we can pay for these items, so that therefore there's no need to issue and have a bond approved. I understand that, recalling historic conversations from the town, from the administration, they've said, well, sometimes we need the money and we're not sure. It's very vague. Bottom line is, it's not necessary, and it represents double dipping. So I oppose it, and I ask that you reject this. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions from the public or comments from the public regarding the bonding ordinance? All right, there being none, I call the public hearing closed. Bring it back to the council. Is there a motion and a second that the proposed ordinance appropriating $1,841,747 for the 2020-2021 capital improvement program and bond authorization be adopted?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, so moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Motion on the floor, discussion from the council. Councilor Tata, you had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not exactly sure who this question is for, maybe Mr. Rose, but I just want to know what exactly the improvements are to Community Lake Park and also the Doolittle tennis courts. If someone could just explain what those projects are, please.
Yeah, good questions, Counselor, but I'm not the person to identify the detail. I believe both of those projects are on the authority of the Public Works Director, and I don't believe he's here tonight for this remote meeting.
Well, I can answer.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Well, maybe the mayor knows. Hold on.
Yeah, the Doolittle Park is in very great need of repair with the tennis courts. Those courts are used by Lyman Hall High School for their interscholastic matches. Very large cracks have opened up. It really needs to be replaced. So that is, and what was the other one?
The other one was Community Lake Park improvements.
Community Lake Park. That may be the erection of a net,
Fencing?
a large fence and net to prevent foul balls from going out onto potentially Route 15. Because of the rebuilding of the entranceway onto Merritt Parkway, the distance from the highway or that entrance ramp to the park has been vastly reduced. So there's balls end up flying out over there. The trees were cut down. There were fairly large pine trees along that one side, and they were cut down in order to provide the entrance ramp. So I think it's a safety issue over the balls flying out there. I believe that's what that project is.
Okay, thank you. And it's because the state was who changed that entrance ramp. Is there any way that we could get reimbursement from the state for that?
We're not aware of anything. The state made its improvements on its property. We're the ones using our property in a way that now can send objects out onto the state highway. So I know of no, unless the General Assembly passed a special legislation on it, there's no grant process.
Okay, thank you. Just clarifying that. And my other question, I guess maybe Mr. Rose, this one might be more for you. So with those two projects, I'm looking at in the budget book on page 84 in the proposed 6-year capital budget. It looks like there's $325,000 for Doolittle tennis courts, and then $40,000 for Community Lake Park. And if, from what I understand, this is money that's sitting there. There's actual cash in that account for those projects. So if there's the cash sitting there, why are we bonding for those?
This authorization gives us the flexibility to bond if in fact we need to.
Okay, so for those projects, we may not actually have to bond because that money's there. And that's your decision whether we bond or we use the cash that's there? That's the mayor's decision?
Yeah, that's it'd be an administrative decision.
Okay. All right, thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, the other facet on this is, I think historically, there's always been a perception that the capital and non-recurring program should have the virtue of a public hearing for people to know how the money's being spent. It also isolates it as an entity unto itself. And if for some other reason costs exceed what is expected, or for some reason cash is not available, the ability to borrow avoids us having to cease and desist, stop a project until money can then be obtained. So part of it is also to make sure that once we initiate a project, we will have access to the funds necessary to complete it.
Next up is Councilor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A question for Mr. Bose. We do this every year when we do the budget, right?
We have for the 15 years I've been here, and I think a long time prior to that as well, yes.
And essentially this item does two things. It authorizes the spending of the money, and then it gives the town a vehicle by which it can alternatively fund those projects, correct?
Correct.
So if this motion failed, what would be the effect?
Great question, Craig. I'm gonna call on our bond counsel, attorney Joe Fozzie, because I believe he's caller one. Joe, if you're hearing that, did you hear Mr. Fishbine's inquiry?
I did. If this ordinance doesn't pass, then you don't have a bond authorization to fund the project. If the funds that are set aside in the capital non-recurring fund either do not appear in that fund or are transferred to another purpose, then the project would have to not go forward. What this ordinance enables you to do is, if there's a need to transfer funds in the capital non-recurring fund to some other purpose, you will still have the funds through this ordinance to proceed with the project without stopping it. Otherwise, go ahead.
No, I didn't know if you were done. I didn't want to step on your toes.
No, just otherwise you'd have to make a decision either to not move forward with the project and stop it where it is, or make an appropriation and hold up the project until the appropriation process is finished. If that appropriation process involves a bond ordinance, then you would have your petition waiting period before further funds could be spent on the project, which, assuming the stage of the project and whether there's a construction contract in place, could result in some damages or at least delay. So this is really a backup.
Okay, so, and I don't know who this question would go to, perhaps Mr. Bose. On a scale of 1 to 100, what is the probability that the money that is in cap and non-recurring would not be used for these projects?
I can answer that question. The projects will not move ahead.
Okay. That doesn't make any sense, with all due respect.
Well, with all due respect,
if we have the money, what other project is the money going to be used for?
this is the approval of those projects. If there is not approval of those projects, we cannot proceed with them. This is our mechanism of approving the projects and moving forward. If you don't want to move forward with the project, then vote against the ordinance.
So if the ordinance fails, the document that we have in the budget, which we would approve, is of absolutely no value.
The proper procedure is before you. If you're in favor of the project, then you approve the ordinance. If you don't like the project, then don't approve the ordinance.
So the question is, by what vehicle does this money, Mr. Fozzie, who's the expert here, we were deferred to, said that the only way the bonding was going to happen or be necessary is if the money that is in the cap and non is used for a different project. The bonding is an alternative. That's what I heard. So I'm just trying to figure out what that money is possibly anticipated to be used for other than these projects.
Look, I'm not going to dance around with a lot of semantics. This is a process we have used for the entire time I've been in office. It has worked very successfully. Administratively, if you want these projects to move forward, then vote for the ordinance. If you do not want the projects to move forward, then don't approve the ordinance. It's very simple.
I thank you for that. And the next question would be, when is the last time in the last 15 years that after approving this ordinance, we have actually bonded one of these projects? When has it happened?
20 years ago, probably about 20 years ago.
So
Not
that's
in the
not
last,
the last
not,
50.
not in the last 15, if that was your question. Not in the last 15, Councilman.
So I don't understand. There seems to be a disconnect. I'm hearing that the project doesn't go forward unless we approve this, but it's an alternative to funding. So I'm going to vote against it because it doesn't appear to advance it. If the representation is that the projects don't happen, then perhaps it should be a divided question. We take the two items that are on there and we vote on them separately. But it appears, I mean, we have to pay for bonding. We would be increasing our debt. We would have to pay interest on that if we issued the bonds. If we have the money, there's no reasonable use alternative that's being represented to us. I don't even know why we put ourselves into that situation, with all due respect. So I appreciate the discussion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Next up, Councilor Testa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I remember asking about this multiple times over the years, and I guess I've tried myself to explain it to my fellow councilors as I understand it. There's still a little bit about it that seems unnecessary, but at the same time, we'd have to find a different way to achieve what we're doing. My understanding is that this was the process that was put into place to basically act as an authorization to actually complete and fund those projects. And it is correct that if by any chance the money that has been already appropriated or set aside for that in the fund had to be used for another purpose, which frankly would be an emergency, which fortunately we've never had one of that magnitude. We already went through the process of authorizing the bonding, and Mr. Bose could go out and get the money. I don't recall we've never bonded. We've never completed these bonding or issuances. It's really just it's a procedure we follow, and as the mayor said, it's worked. So I didn't make a lot of sense to argue it. So that's really what's going on. And the reason I bring that up is I do need to, just for the public's sake, and for any counselors that might have been confused by it. Sorry for using that term. Mr. Chardillo's suggestion that we're double dipping implies that we would both spend the money that's in the fund, electric division money, okay, and borrow the money in a bonding issuance. And as my understanding is that has never happened. I could be corrected on that one. And please do correct me, Mr. Bose. You don't have to acknowledge it, but correct me if I'm wrong. So there's no double dipping. It's really a procedural matter, and that's really all there is to that. I just have one question to follow along with Councilor Fishbine's questions. I always wondered why, if we do have the capital and non-reoccurring fund in the budget, we do have the items set up in the annual plan, and then the money is allocated into it, why we even have to have an appropriation type ordinance to do it, to spend the money in the first place. And if in fact there's some reason we do just have to go through the motions of having an appropriation ordinance, then I suppose theoretically we could have this meeting, have this motion, pass this ordinance without the attached bonding component. So to address the mayor's point that if you vote against this, you can't go forward with the project. So I think maybe we could do it a little in a different manner, but no, tonight's not the night to come up with that. Someone wants to just take it up at another time, then we can discuss it. But this is, that's my 2 cents or 10 cents, as the case may be.
Councilor Laffin?
Thank you. Yeah, I understood. Thank you, Councilor Tester, for covering the double dipping part. Not that I've ever been aware of that we've done both at the same time. I always understood this as a backup payment option, or it's like when you go to buy something in the store, you have cash, you have a credit card, and when you get to the register, if it turns out you need the credit card, you can pull it out. This is just kind of saying we're good for our money, and it would keep the process moving. Mr. Bose, a question too. So in the next agenda item or so, the council is going to be making motions on the budget in different ways than it's been done in the past. And $828,000 is going to be used from different accounts, pilot or cap non-recurring, whatever, to pay for different items than they typically are used to pay for. Is that an example of that account running where the 828 being used in this manner may create a situation where we need to lean on or rely or go to a bond in order to keep the project moving, even if it's a cash flow issue? Am I thinking that through correctly?
Yes, you are, Councilman. And it would really depend on the project start dates, estimated completion dates, cash flows, et cetera, et cetera. Don't forget what the capital non-recurring bookkeeping fund tries to do. It tries to provide a funding mechanism and an authorization mechanism for the town to identify, in the spirit of transparency, since we all love that word. You can't be any more transparent than what we've been doing now. In the 15 years I've been answering these same questions, along with Joe Fozzie and everybody else. Okay. The charter requires a 6-year capital improvement program. This is one mechanism that we utilize to fund that 6-year capital improvement program through the utilization of a cap and non-recurring fund. Cap and non-recurring fund is for some an authorization for bonds. Sometimes they may have to be sold for that, depending upon the overall cash flow of the community. For some reason, about 20 years, 22 years old, and I would have to look up exactly when the town did it last. So please, if I'm off a couple of years, I beg everyone's pardon. But the town did sell some bonds, not for the whole authorization, but and I don't know if there was a cash flow thing or what. But anyway, the bonds were paid back by the cap and non-recurring fund for the next, during the amortization period. It might have been 10 years, I don't recall. And so each of those years, like Mr. Fishbein said, was the payback of principal, but also the interest out of the cap and non-recurring fund. And that sort of decreases how many infrastructure projects that you see on the list on page 84 that Councilor Tata referred to can get done. Because if you're biting into that with interest payments, obviously there's less than our public works folks and our engineering department can do as far as infrastructure improvements. So it's a many-faceted thing. It's an authorization to spend. It's an authorization to fund. It's an authorization to help comply with the charter provisions with regards to a 6-year capital improvement plan. And it's also recognition that the fact that some of these projects are not going to start and stop all at the same time. They're going to stagger depending upon when our public works and our engineering folks can do the work. So versus the general fund, which by general accepted accounting principles and state statute lapse at end of year, which is June 30th. These do not until the projects are completed and or determined and completed, and we close them back out. There's many facets to this. So, but yes, Mr. Laffin, you are correct.
All right, thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, I just urge everybody then to support the motion. Let's keep things moving. We still have a meeting ahead of us, especially if we're going to accommodate the creative budgeting that we're about to do tonight. That and I'll say it again later, that I don't really agree with. In a sense, we could be putting ourselves in a position in order to get to our zero, to bonding, in order to pay for things and keep the cash flow moving, which is fine. Again, as I stated in the last meeting, as long as everybody understands that going forward, it's fine. But I think more than any meeting before, more than any year before, this type of motion and the passage of this is necessary. And as Councilor Testa brought up, if somebody wants to question the process or change it in the future, I think there's certainly the rest of the year to do that. Just as Councilor Marone brought up last year, and we talked about it and moved things around a little bit, and then COVID obviously changed it up even further. Just reevaluating the entire budget process. But as he stated last year, he didn't feel it was time to do it during the budget process, but he wanted to bring it up after. And I think that it would be appropriate in this case as well. Thanks.
All right, thank you. I see no further comments from the council, and we've already had a public hearing on this. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Okay. Fishbein,
No.
Laffin,
Yes.
Marone,
Yes.
Morgenstein,
No.
Shortell,
Yes.
Tata.
Yes.
Shortell, I heard you already. Tata,
Yes,
thank you.
you're welcome.
Thank you. Testa,
Yes.
Dandry,
Yes.
Chairman Savoni.
Yes.
The ordinance passes, the bonding ordinance.
All right, thank you. On to item 8, which is option of fiscal year 2020-2021 budget. We've already had motion meeting, and I'd like to open the floor. After I mute the clerk, I'd like to open the floor for motions on the budget.
Mr. Chairman?
Councilor Marone.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I move that the council adopt the total general fund revenue budget of $172,930,000.
Councilor Marone has fallen off the face of the internet.
Mr. Chairman, if you want a backup motion, I can take over.
Well, you would end up being the mover, so if you want to move it, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I move to adopt the total general fund revenue budget of $172,939,836 per the changes made to the mayor's proposed budget on the attached reconciliation detail sheets for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2020.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion on the motion. Councilor Laffin.
Thank you. As I started to say in the last agenda item, I don't love the budget. I like the zero. I like that there's a zero. I don't like how we're getting to it at all. I know there were a lot of different ways to get there. Some of our plans or my hopes didn't pan out. I think there's ways or areas to cut further to get where we need to get, and that would be that would be what I feel is the most responsible way to do it. You're looking at cutting about $450,000, which is great, and I think there's a lot of good in that too, even if some of the details and the lines where they're coming out are hazy. I think there's good in that. We're all kind of tightening our belt. Most of that, except for 100,000 of it, comes from the general side of government. You know, I think, you know, I hate to say, you know, let's take money from the children, but if you're going to be serious about a zero increase, we're still giving an extra $2.3 million or whatever to the Board of Ed. We're getting one back, and also there's all these little back and forth games and stuff. But I mean, that's something, you know, if everybody's crying about the cuts or moving money, we're still getting everything that everybody wanted, more or less. And basically what's happening is that there's, in addition to these cuts, there's about $828,000 that is going to be spent from a fund that doesn't typically has never covered recurring expenses before. Now it is buying things that we won't buy again, but it's replacing a fund of money that is used annually to buy the same type of items all the time. And my concern is that next year, we now will have to account for a larger increase in taxes than we might normally have in order to counter what we ended up doing was basically reducing the revenue from what is more or less a windfall of money. In a previous meeting, I likened it to using lottery funds to pay for your heating bills when you're just getting by, which is great for the year that you're paying for the heating bills, except then after that year's over and that money is all gone and it's not part of your regular revenue, you don't have any money to pay for the heating bills. Now, if you had used that money to buy a new furnace, that would be different because it's a one-time expense, one and done. And a furnace, just like a pool, usually comes about once in a 10, 20-year period. Again, I know these are very difficult times. I made very passionate pleas in meetings, on public access, on Facebook, Twitter, whatever, that I wanted a zero. And I do. I just don't want it this way. And my unsupport of how we're paying for this is consistent with my votes in the previous years when I've had issues with this. I really wanted to work it out. I admire the efforts of everybody that pulled through on details, especially Councilor Fortel went through spent a lot of time with the CAFR to figure out some possible areas to cut. And I think the cut part I'm better with, the revenue side, moving that money I'm not. And I hope I'm wrong. I hope that we're wrong and that next year we're not going to have this problem and that it's not an I told you so, or we don't have to jump up the taxes or anything like that. I'm just really concerned that it's going to be. And I think it's going to be unless there's another year of creative budgeting. But that can only last so long. And in the past, as Councilor Zandri has pointed out, you know, once you spend it, that's it. When you spend money like this, and that's true this time. And if everybody's aware of that, and I know some of the councilors have stated that they are, they're aware that this is how it works. They're aware that this is what's going to happen. Then that's fine. That's your choice, and we'll all handle it and deal with it together next year. But that's not the way that I wanted to do it, or that I think is a responsible way to do it. In the mayor's proposed budget, we're looking at an average increase of $57 per household, based on a house median average of $183,000. I mean, a lot of people have houses worth a lot more than that. People have houses that are worth less than that. $57, is that a lot for a year? Yeah, it can be. But the way we're paying for this, the people that are going to get a little relief this year, which, sure, it could be necessary because of the COVID stuff, are going to get slammed next year. So everybody keep their eyes out and ears open for the next year on how we can maneuver or what's going to be the next gimmick in order to get it done. Because I'm just really concerned that we're not going to be able to pull it off next year, and it's going to be worse. So that's it. I know everybody probably wants to make comments as well. Thank you.
Next up, Councilor Fishbein.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, there are other ways that this could have been done. One of the ways that was discussed was to take the 1.28 that needed to be found and to split it into 4 ways. To take a portion from the general fund, to take a portion from cap and non, and perhaps to take a portion from the reserves. This is a way to come to it. Simple fact of the matter is that we don't get, to my knowledge, a breakdown of the cap and non-recurring fund as far as, what's in there, where it came from, what's left over from, that kind of stuff. And the 1.2 million is money that we didn't know about. We found out because we asked the right questions. And, for us to ignore that money at a level is irresponsible. As far as the gloom and doom about, what may happen next year is next year. But, another way that this could have been dealt with is to shift capital expenditures into the cap and non-recurring fund. In this budget, we have a couple of last payments on land acquisitions. Tyler Mill property out there is one of them. It's not going to happen again. It's the last payment. That's an expenditure that I don't think we're going to have next year or something similar to that. So an anomaly. There's additional money in cap and non, which over the next few months we're probably going to be looking at. But, ultimately the goal has been from the beginning to get to a 0. And I'm glad that we got there, and I'm glad that we are apparently able to get there on a bipartisan manner. Looking at history, because a portion of these cuts are based upon the historic utilization of taxpayer dollars by these departments, and to take that historic utilization and to cut it in half. Their lowest number. So that's certainly a responsible thing to do. But with that, Mr. Chairman, I just had a question for Mr. Bowes. Just being careful here as we look at what's before us. Mr. Bowes, based upon the cuts that are on the table, is it true that we would have a 0 tax increase, or is there a fudge factor here?
No, there would be no tax increase based upon the ordinances that I sent out to you folks, I believe last Thursday morning, through the town clerk's office as revised, including the reconciliation between the mayors and the councils. The mill rate still computes to the same mill rate as this fiscal year, 29.19 mills. So in summary, no tax increase.
Okay, thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Zandri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I have a couple of comments, and I have a question for Jim Bowes too. So I'll probably tag that at the end. But I kind of want to lead off my comments by kind of dovetailing a little bit onto what Councilor Laffin said. So his comments are I look at his comments in the way that he said them, but I look at them differently, and this is the way that I look at them differently. He is right when he stated that we're potentially taking money out of savings and burning it on everyday costs. But this is where I feel that it's different. He likened it to like a lottery hit. So we have this lottery hit and you put it in a furnace, and that's a smart way to do it because it's a one-time expenditure. And if you've got some sort of a lottery hit and you're going to use it to pay your ongoing expenses, it's okay for now until it runs out. But then what do you do next year? The way that I look at this is like we have $26 million. We're allocating 7.4 of it in order to utilize it for balancing the budget on the revenue and the expenditure side. And we have generally never used more than 32% of it at the maximum. So my issue here is that we also have another variable factor that's coming into play. Even if we took that $865,000 and said, yep, you know what? We're going to consume it. We're going to drop our 26.1 down to 25.4 because we're actually going to burn it up. June 30th is going to come around and we may have 1 million or more that's going to bolster that number back up. So while we may be taking it down to 25.3 or 4, if the $1 million comes in, if it's only $1 million that gets unspent, it's going to go up. And we've done this in years past. We've had budgets go up $5 million, $1 million, $3 million, $2.8 million, and all during those increases of those budgets, the savings account moved from 20.6 million to 29.2 before we started to actually consume some of those allocated dollars. We allocated 4.2, we used 1.4. We allocated 7.2 and used 1.5. We allocated 6.2 and we used 140,000. We're allocating 7.4 right now. Actually, let me backtrack that last comment. Last budget, the current budget, the one that's ending soon, we allocated $6 million. Allocated. If we surplus in $1 million, that means we take the 6 million, put it back in the account, we surplus $1 million and add it into the account. So we don't know yet, but we've heard during the budgets, we asked a lot of questions based on how are you tracking? There were a couple of different departments that got hit and they were tracking hard on their budget, but a lot of them were soft. So I also look at it like, and I agree, again, I agree with Councilor Laffin. I don't want to be doing it this way all the time. But this year, I can't think of, every time I've said, I can't think of a better reason to not dip into the rainy day fund. It's raining. I can't imagine the amount of rain that could possibly beat the rain that we've got this year. There is a reason why we are pushing electric bills forward. We're giving people the opportunity to push electric bills forward to a better month where they could better be able to absorb that impact. Same is true with the taxes. If people need to, and they pay them separately from their mortgages, they can push them out another 90 days. It is definitely an exception year. We are never going to find out how good or how bad a move like this might be, or how neutral the move might be if we don't give it a try at some point. And this is the year to try it. And we've got the support. We've got 7 votes of support to do this. That has never happened before, not to my knowledge. And I think that we are in unprecedented times. It takes unprecedented action like this. And I think, I mean, there's never, when you use the term good gamble, that always sounds shaky. It always sounds shaky when you say, I'm going to take a good risk or I'm going to take a good gamble. But we are already appearing to track on the budget as having a surplus. And we literally have 21 days to go to find out. So this is why I feel like we've never had this narrow of a closure. Usually we're setting this budget a couple of months ago and we're dealing with data from January. We've got updates right up to basically 30 days ago. So this is why I really think this is the year to support it. Now, the question that I have for Jim Bowes, please, is, Mr. Bowes, I want to confirm a couple of things. If we've got some departments that we cut their budget and we made them very tight. The contingency was also another line that we reduced. My first question is, when the budget is in action and is moving, do we have the capability to add funding to that contingency fund if we feel like it's running short from, say, like the general fund balance? That's my first question.
We would have to proceed to the council and get an appropriation from our reserves to the contingency line item. And then to transfer funds out of that contingency line item to the department that's been malaffected.
Okay.
So in essence, we would be using, instead of $7.4 million, which we are using at general fund time right now, just in the general fund portion, we'd be using the 7.4 million plus whatever that amount that needs to be replenished to contingency from that reserve is at that time.
Okay, and that doves right into my next question. So we understand that we've allocated 7.4 already out of the bucket of 26.1. So now the books close on June 30th, but we know that, you know, invoicing still happens in July and August, and there's more time down the road. At what point do the budgets actually zero out? So meaning, my question is, you've got Department A that's got $10,000 left in their budget. It doesn't immediately go back into the general fund. It's supposed to wait a certain amount of time to make sure all the invoices come in and all the bills are paid. At what point does all those actual budget lines close and monies go back to the general fund?
We close most bookkeeping funds, I'm gonna say the middle to late September. And at which time everything is closed, and then you get your, what happens at that point is, what I should say, what the major factor is, how did we do? What were our actual revenues, subtract out our actual expenditures? Did we have an excess of revenues or an excess of expenditures for the fiscal year ended June 30th? So that, I would like to say between the middle of September to late September.
Okay, and the reason that I have that question is, again, going back to, I know there's 26.1 million, and I know there's a bunch of it's already allocated elsewhere to other things. And we are allocating 7.4 into the budget. So now it's September. And maybe some of us have a concern that we might need to beef up contingency, and we don't want to lower that 26.1 number minus all the buckets that we've already minused from. If we're closing books in September and we see that there's $650,000 that would otherwise go back into that fund, can we grab it before it gets to the general fund and immediately transfer it into contingency at that point? In other words, just push it right into contingency, never let it hit the general fund.
Well, first of all, if I may, it's all general fund. Okay, so it's not like we're moving monies anywhere. But in answer to your question, no, we can't, because that's the results from one fiscal year, and it's almost like you start from scratch in a new budget year, 2021.
All right, so if we were getting these funds going into the general fund at that point, we would be in theory raising that $26.1 million, would we not?
Correct. If revenues exceeded expenditures.
Right. If we surplus, I'm making the assumption. This is Councilor Zandri's assumption that we're going to surplus $1 million. We won't know about it positively till December 31st. But based on conversations and the things that we've heard during this budget process, I heard higher numbers, and I'm pressing them down and being more conservative. So I have an understanding that likely that general fund balance would increase despite all the allocations, and that if we needed them, we would be able to put funds into contingency from the general fund at that point and not really be reducing the savings, but basically stripping out the funds that we're surplusing in from this budget that were left over.
Yes, that would be the mechanism that we would have to use. However, and just to let you know, that would be for every dollar that we would have to do that for, we would have less money to afford the council during the 21-22 fiscal year budget process. In other words, this time next year, if you will. But I think you understand that because you and I have had this conversation many times. Yeah.
Right. And again, I look at it from the value of 4.2 in, 4.2 back, 7.2 in, 6.2 back. I understand what you're saying, that if we actually consumed 7.4 that we put in, that would actually drop that fund from 26 down to 19. If it actually got spent, we'd be sitting at 19 and we'd have zero to allocate next year. So I get it, but the most we've ever consumed, and I tracked 13 years here, is $1.7 million in the 2005, 2006 budget. And that was consumption of a $6.9 million allocation from back then. Again, and that's none of that is adjusted for inflation. Those are the actual numbers. So you go back to 2005, we designated 6.9 and we used 1.7. So again, we're talking about $865,000 to keep people from getting hit with $56 on their taxes when we couldn't get the pool for 30. So since it's that critical, this is why we need to do it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Marone?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, it's interesting. We heard the budget this year described as a creative, that we use some sort of creative budgeting or creative methods to come up with what we did this year, which I think is an interesting misdirection when you look at it. Because if you look at what went into coming up with this year's budget from the council perspective, it was looking at what the departments had spent the past several years, was one of the things, and making reductions. The other thing was taking money out of the general fund to help balance the budget, which is something that the administration has done every year I've been in public service. So it's funny. Now, this is my 5th budget on the council, but prior to that, there were 6 budgets on the Board of Ed, and I've heard the same gloom and doom scenario every year of the 11 years. So perhaps I'm just numb to it, but at some point, the wolf's just not going to come. So maybe this is the year. Maybe this is the year that everything goes to the negative. But I just believe that we're sort of being led down the primrose path here, that everything, as long as we stay the course and don't change anything, we'll be fine. I'm actually really proud of how the council handled the budget this year. I think a lot of effort went into it. I think we found some legitimate savings, and I think that this is just the beginning. I think next year it's going to get, I think we're going to get deeper. I think we can start examining some of the individual departments and really finding solid savings in different places. So I hope that I'm really proud of this council. This is the first time we've done something like this. I think for the public, you need to look carefully at who's voting with the administration. And then I think this is just the starting point. I think this process is going to get better from here on out. Last year, I did say that we need to revamp the budget process, and I stand by that because I don't think we get a lot of value in the budget meetings. We have the department heads come in, they petition us for why they need the money that they're going to get. We ask questions about things that have nothing to do with the budget, and then typically we end up spending more money at the end. So I think this year, the only thing that was creative is that we actually took a hard look at the budget, and we were creative enough to get 7 votes. There's nothing creative about how we budgeted. So let's not, tell that tall tale any longer. What we've done is the typical conservative, looking at what we've spent, looking where we have money, making the proper allocations. So thank you very much to the other 6 councilors that voted for this at the last meeting. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I am not seeing any more questions or comments from the council right now. So next up is Mr. Chardullo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to focus on one thing that actually kind of relates to what Councilor Marone was saying. I think he's pretty much hit the nail on the head. I believe, and I have believed for a long time, that there's a lot of savings to be had in the Wallingford budget. But there are a number of things, a number of opportunities that the council is missing. And one of the reasons you're missing it is that you're not getting the information. There is one aspect I want to call your attention to. According to the charter, page 11 under finance, it states that the finance department shall provide financial reports that are prepared for each quarter and for each fiscal year. That has not been done, it is not being done. And I believe the intention of that, and I think that the council can put definition on what that report should look like, but I believe it's intended to be an executive summary of how the town performed to budget for the quarter, and then at the end of the year, a year-end report. If you look at where the town is today through April, our expense budget, I won't get into the revenue aspect of it because then it gets a little too complicated. I'll focus on the expenses. The expense budget through April, not the total budget, but the budget through April is $140,989,000. Our actual performance through April, that's 10 months of the year, is $124,774,000. That is a surplus or an underspending through the first 10 months of $16,214,000. Now, here's where I get a concern. Once this budget process is over, we never pay any attention to how did the town do. We tend to wait. We just wait until next year. And we never get that year-end summary. So what happens is every year, and you can go back 10 years. In fact, I have this on another screen. We have never, ever, at least based on what I have on the screen, back to fiscal year 11, we've never exceeded or met the expense budget. The closest we've come is 2.4 million under. And there are years where we've come in as high as 4.4 under. So what does all that mean? It means that if you look at your current budget, the number that the administration has plugged in there for the current fiscal year, in my opinion, is dramatically incorrect. It's it's inflated. And the information I have to demonstrate that is 10 years worth of, or 9 years worth of audited reports. I think the council has to not only look at the micro, which I think most of you have been doing. You've been doing a great job this last year, digging in these departments and so forth. But I really think you have to have the macro perspective, which is viewing the last 5 years or so. And by the way, in particular, how do we finish this year by reviewing that year-end report? And you don't have to have all of the invoices reconciled when you do that. The finance department has some very bright people. They know what to expect, what they expect to come in, and what we've been charged for. And we should hold them accountable for telling us, what are the numbers show, and what do you think they should show based on what's outstanding? That'll give you a true picture. And I think if you do that, you'll find that consistently every year we inflate the expenses and we underestimate the revenue. And until you start looking at that macro, you're never going to see it. It sounds like maybe some of you figured that out. So again, it's in the charter. They're required to do it. You have a right to ask that it's provided. And I would love to see the council ask finance department to come back sometime in August, which is after the end of the fiscal year, and do an in-depth conversation of how did the town finish in relation to the budget, and then compare that to what was submitted to you. And I think you'll see that it's inaccurate, that there's this gaping hole. And if this year's forecast that's being submitted is incorrect by millions, then next year's will also be incorrect by millions. And we just go on and on and on with it. And but having said all of that, I want to commend the council for the work that you did do this year. You really dug in, and I wouldn't be concerned about hurting the town if you zero the tax increase, because I think there's plenty of dollars in the town coffers to be had and should be had. Thank you.
Councilor Lappin.
Mr. Chairman, if I may address those 3 points that I heard there.
Go ahead.
The 3 points I heard there was regarding underspending based upon the June 30th budget report. In the month of June, or I'm sorry, of the April report, showing tons of money unspent. We spend, in the month of June, we have to make 4 Board of Education payrolls for those folks who work for the school system, the certified folks, who choose to get what they call summer payrolls. There are 4 of them, 2 in July, 2 in August, that are charged to the old fiscal year because that's when the employee of the school system earned those monies. So you've got tens of millions of dollars being charged the last week or so in June. So there is no way around that. That's when the costs get charged to those accounts until that budget document. You're not going to see tens of millions of dollars that won't be spent until late June, as well as a very large bond issue that we pay back on June 15th every year for the next several years at least, as well as other year-end entries that we make towards the end of June to recognize expenditures. So there has nothing to do with the inaccuracy. That's a misguided and frankly, it's a stupid comment. It's a stupid comment, and I take umbrage at it, where they're saying that we are, and I take professional umbrage at it because they're saying that inaccurate information is being deliberately given to 9 council members. That's crap. Okay? Total nonsense. Okay? Nothing more, nothing less. There is a huge difference between generally accepted accounting principles, which is what is used in the CAFR, versus budgetary accounting. For example, what you see in the CAFR does not recognize appropriations in force. So if I had a line item like revaluation, and the council allowed me during that budget process to bring those monies into the new fiscal year as an appropriation in force, that does not show up as an expenditure in the old year. Okay, it shows up basically as unspent. We recognize that on the balance sheet as a reservation of the reserves. Sort of what Jason was talking about before, the breakdown of that fund balance. That also includes the Board of Education 1%, which is now the 2% fund. So if there's $2 million or $3 million of funds that have been approved by the council to utilize in the next budget year as an appropriation in force, as what we call page 89 of your budget book, that's not going to show up as an expenditure in the GAAP financial statement. So just to throw comments out there that finance is giving you something that is totally different is nonsensical. I know it's not easy to understand it, and I've been doing this a long time, and I don't understand it all. I honest to God, we have to rely on our auditors, our CPAs, to sometimes bring us in the loop. So if you're looking at a CAFR and you're hoping that that's going to paint the whole picture, you have to reconcile it back to your budget. Okay, so to come to the council, to a public meeting or a remote meeting or a question and answer period and say that, you know, you're being misled, or maybe not stated, but maybe implied, that's nonsensical. And I'm not going to have that. I'm sick and tired. I've been hearing it for a long time, sitting here in this town, and I'm just disgusted by it, and I've had it. Okay, so that is that. We will send you June 30 reports, you know, middle of July. And frankly, they're going to be meaningless within about 3 weeks after that. We will continue to send you more reports after that. The charter mentions quarterly. And that's correct. We don't give you quarterly reports. We give you monthly reports. I'm pretty sure it's not a charter violation if we're exceeding what the charter asks us to provide. And for someone to get up there and every single year continue to say that I am violating the charter, I'm getting sick and tired of it. I'm sick and tired of it. And I apologize to those of you who will have to listen to this, The mayor just backed up about 6 feet because I don't have my mask on. He backed up about 14 feet now. But it's just ridiculous. And I hope to God, I really hope to God, if I can bring God into a public meeting, that those of you who are looking at CAFRs and budgets are not getting the two confused when you're making decisions. And certainly not the words of someone who has his own agenda. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield the balance of my time.
Counselor Laffin.
Thank you. I just wanted to step back. I don't know if Councilor Marone is on or not, but I wanted to address what I feel is his mischaracterization of my use of the word creative. He only addressed the cuts in his statement and how that was a good thing. That's exactly what I said. My use of the word creative is in the use of the $128,000 from non-recurring funds towards recurring funds. That's creative. The cuts, I'm good. Had we divided the question in the budget's motion meeting, I would have supported all the cuts. Could have probably supported more. But I get the approach on the cuts. But my use of the word creative is on this other source of revenue, of changing the label of it. So I just wanted to make that abundantly clear in case in my initial rambling that was not for some reason. Thanks.
Counselor Shortell. You have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I know. I was trying to talk from the phone, but can you hear me now?
Yes. You were actually fine with your computer audio, but take your pick.
All right, can you hear me now?
Sure.
I'm sorry. It's just I keep losing. I've heard like half of what everyone said. I did hear all of Mr. Bose, which was good. So just a couple comments and reactions. I actually did want to kind of echo a little bit of what Mr. Bose said, and just from my experience in terms of information. The town, we are provided monthly reports. They are emailed to us. So they are very valuable. There's a lot of info. You have to go through it. That's our job. I also want to acknowledge all of the work. A lot of questions went to Mr. Bose, to Mr. Hutt. Barbara routed everything. I mean, it's been a lot. People don't see that, but there's a lot of back and forth. That they bend over backwards to get us answers. So I appreciate that as well. I do wish the monthly reports didn't always flip, because they're always facing the wrong way when I look at them on my iPad, and I get to but anyway, that's just a minor complaint. And I do want to follow up. And Mr. Rose, I'm sorry I didn't call you back yesterday. I appreciate the call. I do want to follow up on the cap and non conversation, but we can do that offline. I guess I would just, again, reacting to some of the public comment, I think one of the reasons we're looking like we're going to have a huge surplus is the health insurance, and I'm worried about that. With COVID, that has basically suppressed elective doctor's visits, and it's I think artificially suppressed claim utilization that's going to pick up as the world as we reopen. So and we also have a situation where we have to have the health fund up to $5.1 million. So I would expect that a lot of the whatever surplus we may have to be transferred, or a big part of it, to the health fund. We'll find out. regarding the Board of Education, just a couple comments on the Board of Ed budget, because I've been on record as talking about all the money they have and all this. I did look at, you look at their budgeting and their surplus. They typically run about a $500,000 surplus. They're running a bigger one this year because of COVID and the transportation issues, but typically in a normal year, they run about $500,000. And that represents about 0.5% of their budget. And if you line up all the town departments, they are actually the most accurate one, which I did. I did in a spreadsheet just because I was curious, and I lined up their average surplus and I lined up versus their budget. And the Board of Ed actually came out as the tightest one, just something that I didn't expect. So I think we're all thrown by the dollar amount, and we say, oh, they have so much money, but they tend to spend their money. The other thing I would just add with the Board of Ed, if you look at the last 10 years of surpluses, well, we haven't always run a surplus, but the last 10 years, whether the town ran a deficit or a surplus, half the time, I know the comment was made earlier, the Board of Ed is 2/3 of the budget, why shouldn't they get a bigger reduction? Half the time when we run a surplus, it's actually the town side that's generating more of the surplus. It's actually the inverse. So sometimes it is the Board of Ed with a huge surplus, but as often as not, it's the town side. So just a data point. I do object a little bit the notion of using non-recurring funds for recurring expenses. We do that already with the budget. If you look at the item, I mean, if you voted this is my 5th budget as well as Councilor Marone's, but for someone to say that, if you've ever voted for any of these budgets, you have voted to use non-recurring costs for recurring expenses because you voted for the money from the general fund to be put in. That's a fact. So that's really not a way to characterize it. It's really the issue of how many non-recurring funds do you want to use? It's not to use them or not. The budget historically has always used them, and as Councilor Zandri pointed out, we typically put a lot back. We don't always put a lot back, but I just think that there's a lot of variables in these budgets, and I understand it's complicated, but there's variables in terms of how revenues come in, how expenses come in, state funding, what we're going to need next year. Is it another dump truck? Is it something else? So there's a lot of variables. So I think some of these analogies, these simplistic analogies about, well, I have a budget to go to the store and I'm going to pick up $20 off the ground. If I use that, now I have to use it. Now I've put myself in a hole. I think they ignore the complexities of the budget. And so I just think that it's important to note that. I don't think this is perfect at all, but I don't think any budget I voted on is perfect. So anyway, those are my comments. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Tata?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wasn't planning on saying anything because I thought we all said what we had to say last week, but I guess this is what we do at this meeting too. So I just wanted to start off by saying I think that the mayor's budget was a very good budget, and I think our mayor typically does a very good job of preventing big spikes in our taxes. And if this year weren't during an economic crisis, I may have supported the mayor's budget. But when the mayor was doing his budget in departments, it was kind of right in the beginning of COVID, and obviously a lot came with that we learned in the months after that. I think really affected what we felt like we needed to do. And I think what we did was we really listened to our residents and businesses that are hurting right now. And, through compromise, and we came up with an idea that has bipartisan support. And I think the goal was to help our taxpayers. And I think that this package does that. I don't think it's very likely that it's going to affect services in a negative way. I think that we addressed the cuts that we're going to take. I don't think will affect services where anyone will notice it too much. And the big takeaway too is that this money that we're using, I believe it's almost $850,000. It was in cap and non. That was leftover money from projects that were completed, and that was taxpayer money. So we're using taxpayer money to help the taxpayers during I believe it might have been Councilor Zandri that said during the rainy day, this is the rainy day. It's a global economic crisis. And so to just give the taxpayers back money that was sitting there that they've already given, and it was sitting there because it was completed projects. I think that was a good idea, along with the other cuts that we made. I think I may have said this in the beginning of the budget process to some of the counselors, but I work in the car business, and one of the sayings that we have is that, it was a good negotiation when everybody walks away a little bit upset. And I think that's kind of how some of us feel. Obviously, I don't think this is perfect. I don't think this plan is the ideal plan, but we really compromised a lot. And I think we really listened to what all of the counselors, or most of the counselors, felt like they wanted and felt was fair and reasonable. And the goal, again, was to help out our taxpayers in a time of need. And I think we accomplished that. And so, I wanted to just thank my fellow counselors. You all know this was my first budget, and obviously a very unique one and a much lengthier budget process than is typical. But I was really honored to work with all of you on this, and to come up with this compromise. And I also want to thank Mr. Bowes, because I kind of bombarded him with questions, and he was always willing to talk to me, email with me, and really explain everything. And so I just wanted to thank everybody involved. And again, I think this is a good package, and it's going to help our taxpayers in during an economic crisis. So that's my only comments. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chardulo, I guess I have to unmute your phone. There you go.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say that I'm not going to respond to Mr. Bose's emotional rant, because that's what it was. And I think all it did was serve to deflect from the point that I'm trying to make, which is that there is a recording in the charter that requires a quarterly and a year-end report, which, if it's formatted properly at a macro level, would allow you, the council, to spend probably an hour. I think it would be a very good use of your time to review this year's performance to what the budget was. And that will give you an idea of whether the budget that you have approved is in fact an accurate budget. We've never done it. I think you should do it. I think you should ask for it. And as far as there is one piece of data Mr. Bose mentioned that I'll respond to. He was relating to the shortfall through April and the fact that a lot of expenditures come in June. Well, that's fine. I'm not debating that at all. It would be nice to see the entire budget in that context, formatted in the same way that it's being submitted to you now, the first 4 or 5 pages. Very easy to do. Finance can provide their added value of it. If there's a shortfall, hey, we thought we were going to come in at, on budget, we came in under budget. And again, I absolutely believe you'll come in under budget again, because you've done it for the last 10 years. Have no idea why. Yes, it's a complicated process, but if we could get more information, information that has been asked for, it will probably enlighten all of us, and maybe we can do a better job of forecasting the future. Thank you.
All right. I see nothing further in the comment bar. And so we're still voting on the first motion on the budget. So, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Thank you. Fishbein,
Yes.
Laffin,
No.
Moreau,
Yes.
Morgenstein,
Yes.
Trutell,
Yes.
Tata,
Yes.
Testa,
Yes.
Landry,
Yes.
Chairman Savoni.
No.
Motion passes.
On to item 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
oh, sorry, I didn't know if I was recognized or not. I move that we adopt the total general fund expenditure budget of $172,939,836 per the change made to the mayor's proposed budget of the attached reconciliation detail sheets for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2020.
Second.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Councilor Testa, I just saw your hand. Did you want to comment?
No, I was seconding, but I was behind Christine.
So you thirded.
You can have it.
All right. Any discussion on this motion? I see no callers. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Fishbein,
Yes.
Laffin,
No.
Moreau,
Yes.
Morgenstein,
Yes.
Trutell,
Yes.
Tata,
Yes.
Testa,
Yes.
Landry,
Yes.
and Chairman Savoni.
No.
And the motion passes.
Yes, it does. On to the third motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I move that we establish the property tax rate for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2020 at 29.19 mils. With the exceptions provided under the deferral program approved by the town council on April 14, 2020 for Governor's Executive Order 7S and 7W. Real estate and personal property taxes in excess of $100 shall be made in 2 installments. The first of which is due July 1st, 2020, payable on or before August 1st, 2020. The second installment shall be due January 1, 2021, payable on or before February 1, 2021. Real estate and personal property taxes of $100 or less shall be paid in 1 installment, date July 1, 2020, and payable on or before August 1st, 2020, as provided by Connecticut statute, Chapter 204, Section 12-144. Motor vehicle taxes shall be made in 1 installment due July 1st, 2020, and payable on or before August 1st, 2020, as provided by Connecticut General Statute, Chapter 204, Section 12-144A. Delinquent motor vehicle taxes shall be paid only in cash or by certified check or money order as provided by Connecticut General Statute, Chapter 204, Section 12-146. Property taxes in an amount of less than $5 shall be waived. Checks and payment of property taxes which have been returned by the bank shall be subject to a $30 fee. So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Councilor Fishbein has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did hear Councilor Marone reference one of Governor Lamont's executive orders, which I believe would make the payment due, the July payment due maybe October, no, perhaps October 1. But I didn't hear something to that effect when he said when it was due. I thought he said August. So I just looking for a little clarification there.
Mr. Bose, are the tax bills we generate going to reflect the what we adopted several months ago with respect to deferring payments for 90 days?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
It added a new paragraph above that, just not to change the whole ordinance the way the town normally adopts it, but just to bring in that language mentioning that the council did provide the deferment as well, in accordance with the governor's executive orders.
So, Mr. Chairman, my question is, there's going to be some sort of publication of this passage, I believe. The due date that I believe Councilor Marone read indicated August 1. How is the layperson reading this to know that the executive order is a different date?
Well, we adopted the executive order and did so specifically referencing taxes, first of all, and second of all, the bills I've received have come in with the deferment date referred to on the bill, so that if the bills are generated consistently, that would be notice to the taxpayer.
Okay, so is there like publication, like in the newspaper, of this passage? Because that's not a tax bill. I understand what you just said, and I try not to confuse the public, right? So is there going to be publication of this budget adoption in the newspaper? And will it reflect the proper date?
I think I can hopefully answer that. Yeah, these motions are not published, per se, the way they're being read tonight. They're part of the minutes, part of our authorization to proceed with the process. But when the levy is introduced by law, by state statute, the tax collector has to put something, a notification in the newspaper, which she will, and we have worked on language as you're suggesting tonight.
So that language will indicate that the payment is not due August 1, as was read in the motion, but rather, I believe, October 1, correct?
That's correct, unless you are, your taxes are collected by a mortgage escrow company or your financial institution that holds your mortgage, or if you're a landlord. Those are the provisions under those two executive orders. If you're a landlord, you actually have to apply.
I understand. I just don't want confusing messages out there. That's all I'm looking to try and prevent. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I have an answer to my question.
All right, then, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Certainly. Fishbein,
Yes.
Lappin,
No.
Marone,
You're muted, Joe.
I'm sorry, thank you. That's a yes.
thank you. Morgenstein,
Yes.
Shortell,
Yes.
Tata,
Yes.
Testa,
Yes.
Landry,
Yes.
Chairman Savoni.
No. That passed. On to the fourth.
I'm sorry, that passed.
Mr. Chairman, I move we adopt the budgets of the divisions of the Department of Public Utilities for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2020, as stated on our agenda.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion on this motion. Seeing no new callers on, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Fishbein,
Yes.
Lappin,
Yes.
Lappin, was that a yes?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, we're on
Marone.
to the operation. So.
Oh, okay. Marone,
Yes.
Morgenstein,
Yes.
Shortell,
Yes.
Tata,
Yes.
Testa,
Yes.
Landry,
Yes.
Chairman Savoni.
Yes.
The motion passes.
On to the fifth.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move we adopt the budget of the Capital Non-Recurring Expenditures Fund for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2020, in the amount of $1,841,747 revenues, per the changes made to the mayor's proposed budget on the attached reconciliation detail sheets, and $1,841,747 expenditures.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion on this motion. Seeing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Fishbein,
Yes.
Lappin,
Yes.
Marone,
Yes.
Morgenstein,
Yes.
Shortell,
Yes.
Tata,
Yes.
Testa,
Yes.
Landry,
Yes.
Chairman Savoni.
Yes.
Motion passes.
On to the sixth.
Item 6, to approve special funds of the Board of Education, or I move that we approve special funds of the Board of Education of the town of Wallingford for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2020, as attached hereto and made a part hereof, pages A through C.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Fishbein,
Yes.
Lappin,
Yes.
Yes.
Testa,
Yes.
Landry,
Yes.
and Chairman Savoni.
Yes.
Motion passes.
On to item 7.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve special funds of the town of Wallingford general government for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2020, as attached hereto and made a part hereof, pages D and C.
I will second, but I want to know it's pages D and E.
Oh, yep, duly noted.
Yeah.
It should be pages D and E, not D and C.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion on this motion. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Fishbein,
Yes.
Lappin,
Yes.
Marone,
Yes.
Morgenstein,
Yes.
Shortell, hello,
Yes. Sorry.
it's all right, pay attention. Tata,
Yes.
Testa,
Yes.
Landry,
Yes.
Chairman Savoni.
Yes.
Motion passes.
On to item 8.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve capital appropriations in force reserve fund for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2020, in the amount of $2,211,722 revenue and $2,221,722 expenditures. This represents the amount as of May 31, 2020, which may decrease as expenditures occur through June 30th, 2020. This amount may also increase if the council approves any unspent Board of Education funds to be carried forward in the 2% fund for fiscal year ending 6/30/2020. See the attached detailed budget book, page 89.
Second.
Did you say 2,211 or 2,221? I'm making sure I didn't mishear you.
No, it should be 2,211,722.
Okay. Very good. And that's what you seconded, Councilor Tata?
Correct. Thank you.
Discussion on this motion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Fishbein,
Yes.
Lappin,
Yes.
Marone,
Yes.
Morgenstein,
Yes.
Shortell,
Yes.
Tata,
Yes.
Testa,
Yes.
Landry,
Yes.
Chairman Savoni.
Yes.
Motion passes.
On to item 9.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we authorize the chairman to sign 3 copies of the finalized budget, 2 to be filed with the town clerk and 1 to be placed on file in the Wallingford Public Library.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on that motion? Please, really, let's talk about it.
I oppose.
You're not a counselor. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Fishbein,
Yes.
Lappin,
Yes.
Marone,
Yes.
Morgenstein,
Yes.
Shortell,
Yes.
Tata,
Yes.
Testa,
Yes.
Zandri,
Yes.
Chairman Savoni.
I vote no, but I'll do it anyway.
You gonna vote no?
I did. I vote no, but the motion
Wow.
passed.
Motion passes anyway.
All right, there being no further business on this agenda, I declare this meeting over and adjourned.
This
Night.
conference is no longer being recorded.